You are listening to the Ponchatoula Podcast with your host, Parker Larison. We bring you local news and community interviews from the Ponchatoula-Hammond area. Located at the crossroads of I-12 and I-55, deep in the bayous of South Louisiana. Parker is a husband, father, personal injury attorney, author, and community volunteer who is on a mission to share the unique food, culture, events, and people of Ponchatoula with the world. And here's your host, Parker Larison.
Don't you just love Thanksgiving dinner? The big, plump, juicy turkey, the piping hot dressing, the gravy on top, green beans, carrots, sweet potatoes, delicious sides, pecan pie, whatever pie, you might like apple, sweet potato. It's a meal I enjoy every year. I look forward to it for weeks and weeks at a time. I wish we could order that food year round. I don't understand why you can't order, a good turkey dinner at a restaurant in May. But anyway, it's a delicious meal. It's always fun. And I bring that up because today, although it's not Thanksgiving, I was able to not only eat that delicious meal, but serve it to, along with many of my friends from our Rotary Club and the Kiwanis Club here in Ponchatoula. We were able to serve this food to our local elderly population through the Council on Aging. It's one of my favorite days of the year every year because basically the Rotary and Kiwanis Clubs join forces to buy tons of turkey and sides and just delicious meals. And we invite everybody over to the Kiwanis Log Cabin and these just great heroes of our community, older men and women who have done so much for Ponchatoula, pile in the doors, and we serve them heaping plates of delicious Thanksgiving food about a week or so before Thanksgiving. And everybody has a great time. And it's so rewarding because not only do I get to eat with them, after we're done serving them, we make ourselves a plate and we pile right in there and eat side by side with the elderly community. But you're making new friends. You're learning things. You're meeting people, some of whom have lived here their whole life and are, enjoying their twilight years in Ponchatoula. Some who moved here late in life. But it's just a fun day. And today I got to do that with the person that I'm interviewing in this podcast, Mr. Danny Williams. He's a member of our Kiwanis Club, and he is the longtime, for decades and decades, sponsor of the Kiwanis High School Club, which is called the Key Club. And that's how I got to know him. I was the Key Club president back in the 90s, and Mr. Danny was my mentor. And we've stayed in close touch ever since then. He's kind enough to invite my family over to his house to eat gumbo every Christmas Eve. And Brandy and I and our boys look forward to it. It's one of the best days of the holiday season. We also enjoy an annual tradition of taking him out to eat lunch or dinner to catch up around that time. And so I'm excited that day's coming here in a few weeks too. But Mr. Danny is just one of the best people that Ponchatoula has to offer. He is many things. He is a great man. He's a great Christian. He is dedicated to his church, First Baptist Church in Ponchatoula. He's been there his whole life. He served as a deacon, as the music minister, and as a longtime parishioner. And his faith means a great deal to him. So it's neat to hear him talk about that a little bit in this interview. He's a musician, a talented musician. He paid his way through college on a music scholarship through the band. And he talks a bit about his PHS band days and the friends he made there. And then playing in the band at Southeastern. And what a great opportunity that was. He is a master educator. He just basically done education at every level you could think of. From the classroom where I met him, he was my computer science teacher in high school, to administration, where he was a principal in elementary school here in town. He served as an administrator at higher levels at the parish-wide level. He was the director of curriculum. He's taught at just about every level, including college. I should say he's no longer Mr. Danny Williams. He's Dr. Danny Williams. He went back and got his doctorate and has taught, college courses. Just a great guy. Had a great, tremendous career. He's recently retired and done very well. But he's still, despite long having left Ponchatoula High School, having even retired from the school system, period, he still sponsors the local Key Club because he sees what an impact this club's making. They're dedicated to building the local homes and schools and communities, and they do a great job with that. And he's teaching young men like me, like I was in the 90s, he's teaching us the skills that we need to become leaders, to contribute to society, and to do great things. And I could not be more proud to be his friend. He's a wonderful fella. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. He talks about his family's restaurant. You've probably heard of the Coffee Pot, which was an institution here in Ponchatoula in the good old days. For decades and decades, they opened up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They would only close on Christmas and a few other select days of the year. And it was just the place to go. Whether you were starting your day with a hot cup of coffee or ending your shift and going for a place to eat after work or date night or whatever, the Coffee Pot was where it was happening in downtown Ponchatoula. He's going to tell you all about that. He's going to tell you about a wonderful Ponchatoula love story between his parents, who are two of my favorite people ever. He's going to tell you about his great siblings that are doing great things all over, from the law enforcement community to the youth sports community to you name it. The Williams family is out there serving it and doing well. And Ponchatoula is a much better place because Danny Williams is in it and because his great family has been here forever and is still here. So I look forward to this interview. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I did participating in it. With no further ado, it's Danny Williams on the Ponchatoula Podcast. Welcome back to the Ponchatoula Podcast. This is your host, Parker Larison, and I'm really, really excited to be interviewing one of my heroes and one of the principal mentors in my childhood, my high school years, and that's Mr. Danny Williams. Danny, will you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Yes, I'd be glad to, Parker, and thanks for having me. Well, as I tell people, I was born and raised in Ponchatoula, and it goes further back than just me. Even though my parents weren't necessarily born here, they spent most of their lives here. I want to go back a little bit and talk a little bit about my dad's family because they played a major role in the history of Ponchatoula. At least I think it's a major role in that they...
Jim Herron thinks it's a major role, and he's good. The town historian, right. So it's official.
Good, yes. And that is that they owned and operated the Coffee Pot.
Right.
Started in the mid-30s, I want to say, and lasted till the early 70s, so 40 years. And so that was over there, actually where the Chamber of Commerce building is now. That's part of it. I think that half of the building. Of course, a lot of my childhood memories come from there.
Yeah.
I was born in 1961, at, I guess they called it 7th Ward Hospital back then. And so the Coffee Pot was a major factor. So I've done some family history research. By the way, Ancestry.com can be addictive, so be careful about that.
I bet.
And actually, there's a yearly fee to keep it going.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, I found some things that I thought were interesting in my family's history. Dad always said he was born in Magnolia. But I looked at when I was looking at the census, you can look at the census online, and the 1930 census showed my grandfather, Paul Williams, here as a boarder in Ponchatoula, somewhere along Railroad Avenue. I think there was a boarding house along there. And my dad and his mom, and he was the middle child, so at least another brother, were up in Osaka, Mississippi, living with her parents. And so, of course, I said, oh, no, I've discovered this terrible thing, They weren't together.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Right. Well, digging a little further, my dad's dad, my grandfather, worked for the railroad.
Okay.
And I think he was a bookkeeper for the railroad. And so, as you know, the railroad runs from New Orleans all the way up.
Yeah, right there. The country market was the railroad
That's
stop.
Exactly right. And, of course, Osaka was one of those places along the railroad stop up in Mississippi. In fact, my grandmother's family, the Vonnedo, she was a Vonnedo, and they had a barbershop restaurant right there across from the railroad.
Okay.
And so I imagine that that's how they met, somewhere along the railroad. Yeah. My grandfather's father was the pastor at First Baptist Church in Amite.
Really?
Yeah, it was Bryant Williams, I believe was his name. And so this was in World War I era, the early 1900s. And so I imagine, A-meets along the railroad track as well, that somehow, Grandpa and the railroad and Osika and A-meet and led all the way down to Ponchatoula. And so I can just imagine him being here in the boarding house working for the railroad company and thinking Ponchatoula needs a diner.
Yeah.
And the opportunity that Ponchatoula has, because it was the gateway to New Orleans.
Right.
I think it was over the main street at one point.
I love those old photographs, that beautiful sign that said Gateway to New Orleans.
Right,
yeah.
right.
What a majestic time in our history here.
It was and people don't remember it as like that because this was before the interstate. So all the truckers, all the traffic had to go through town in order to get 51 down to New Orleans and take the old road. And so I would hear that, there were trucks lined up and down Main Street. You could park in the middle of Main Street at that time. And the diner, the coffee pot, stayed open 24 hours a day. So it was a 300. In fact, they didn't have I think they might have closed on Christmas morning, but they may not have for a while because they didn't even have a key to the restaurant.
That's wild.
Because they never locked it.
Think of the hours they must have had to keep that restaurant open.
So that goes into to part of the story as to why it's not open.
Okay. That makes sense. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. That's right. Yeah. So anyway, the story goes is that Grandma closed it. I think it's Eisenhower Roosevelt died. I'd have to, because she was such a fan of, she was so distraught.
Whoa, she was devastated by the president's death.
That she closed the restaurant that day. So that was like one of the only days it closed. They did start closing it, I believe, in the 50s and 60s, maybe for Christmas Eve, but they wanted to be a place where people could go to get food anytime, day or night.
That's the way it was in the old days. For me, it was the donut shop on the corner of 7th Street growing up. It would seem like, I don't know if it closed any days of the year, but it was 24/7 and it just seemed like it never shut down.
Right. And people need places like that. I don't know if they're as common. I don't believe they're as common now. And so as a result, that became the hangout. So if you grew up in Ponchatoula in the 40s, 50s, even 60s, the coffee pot was where you went before school, after school, late at night, after dances, etc. Of course, Dad, he worked the business. So, when your family owns a business, you don't have a lot of choices about that.
All hands on deck. Every kid's working somewhere.
That's exactly
Washing dishes, cooking burgers.
So he got away
coffee
as often as he could through his early adult years, I'll say. He did join the Navy near the end of World War II.
I remember him being a veteran.
And it was they were doing a surge, from what I understand. I remember reading something about it, or him telling me about it, similar to, they had this surge not too long ago trying to end the war.
Sure.
So there was a big push to get a lot of people to join the military at that point. He was only 17, and I think they may have had to sign something. I'm not sure. But of course, to hear his cousin, I got to talk to his 90-year-old cousin a couple of years ago. She lives in Virginia. She said they were so upset when little Dickie joined the Navy. They were just...
So he volunteered while he was still underage to go...
Right.
That's amazing.
And so
they call it the greatest generation for a reason.
That's exactly right.
It was proof.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he went in the Navy, came back, graduated from Southeastern in business, continued to work at the restaurant. Yeah. During the summers, he would take these trips, they would hitchhike back then,
Whoa,
across the country, and he would actually go over to California and fight fires in Hollister. Oh, wow. Anyway, he was late getting married. But that goes into the love story I'd like to tell, if that's okay.
Please do, because I've got to say before you do, your parents are two of my favorite people in my whole life, and I really, I'm sure you're going to get into how much you miss your dad, but he really was a hero. Yes. And your mom's just the sweetest lady left in Ponchatoula.
That. Thank
so
you.
I can't wait to hear how they met, fell in love, and created all you Williams kids. So thank you for being willing to share that with us.
Sure. So now Dad was in his early 30s at that point. He had done a lot of things, working at the business, traveling, Navy, college. And Mom was in high school. She was a high school senior, and she had a longtime boyfriend, and they were even thinking about getting married. And so prom was coming up. Her family didn't have a lot of money. They lived along the railroad track here. Her dad was in construction, and her mom stayed at home with their 5 children. They were the Fairburns. My grandmother, her mother was a mine. And so she had a prom dress. She was dating this boy, but there was a problem. And it was a bigger problem then than back today, I guess, maybe. He was Catholic.
Oh, wow. Yikes. Yeah. Yeah.
You can identify with that.
As a Catholic boy who luckily married a Baptist girl, I can understand that goes way back. But thank God for me, times have changed a little bit.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they're sitting in the parking lot at St. Joseph Catholic Church, going in for these meetings that she had to convert.
Okay. Yeah.
And she was just sitting there, and she said, this isn't right.
Yeah, can't do it. It's not her.
It's not me.
And nothing's more important than your faith. So you've got to stick to your heart.
So if there was a promise ring or something involved, she just said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. She comes home. Of course, her mother was a little upset.
Yeah.
And said, you've ruined your life. Every mother wants their daughter to get married, a good family, things like that. And what are you going to do about prom? She had her dress. It wasn't too far away. And Mom said, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it. Okay. Well, in the meantime, they went to First Baptist Church here on the corner, the old church there. And Dad and his parents went to First Baptist. They didn't go.
Do you know how far back your family goes? I mean, because you were music minister there when I was in high school.
Right. So I would say, so this was in the late 50s when they were meeting. And now, of course, Dad's family with the restaurant, they would come, him and his mother would come on Sunday nights. So maybe they had the morning shift at the restaurant, And Mom said she would notice that my dad and his mother would be over there on the other side of the church, And she just was always impressed with Dad and how he was with his mother and took care of his mother. And she had heard, you can judge a man by the way they treat their mother.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Words to live by.
Right. And so she was kind of like, so she arranged it as they're walking down the steps. They had big steps coming down the front of First Baptist. So she just arranged that they would all walk out at the same time. All right.
So she timed it.
She timed it. That's
nice.
right. And so she kind of said, hey, how are you? He said, fine, I'm not sure how it went, from there, but it's like, do you want to go get a Coke,
Right.
And I said, sure, And soon after that, she asked him if he would take her to prom, and he said yes. And so I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, wow, that's such a neat story. Now, how did your grandparents handle the age difference? Was that an issue at all, or was your grandfather your father so respectable?
So I'll tell you,
everybody was okay with it.
I think that part of it, of course, his family was thrilled that he was getting married because you start to get worried, you know. Her family wanted her to marry into a nice family, and of course his family had the restaurant here in town, well-known family,
so match made in heaven.
Yeah, well, that's what I called it, match made in heaven, literally. And so, we've been connected with the church for a long time.
Yeah. So long before I was born or you were born.
That's exactly
right. The Williams family was
so,
over there at First Baptist.
That's right.
And you still are. That's amazing.
Still there. That's right. Both fathers were, grandparents were deacons, and then Dad was a deacon of the church, and I'm fortunate to be a deacon at the church,
neat. How long have you been doing that?
So that happened in my 20s. So somewhere along there, so about 30 years, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of my heroes here in Ponchatoula serve on that deacon board or have over the years, from you to Kevin Crevetto to Byron Willie. It's just
it's an honor and a privilege and a responsibility, And
y'all do a great job
because we do want to keep that legacy going here in Ponchatoula because it is over 100 years the church has been here. So
my wife and I attend Mount Calvary Baptist Church at Independence, where she grew up. But from time to time when we get sick, which we were this weekend, we've got bugs going through our family. will watch your services at First Baptist
good.
online. So it's pretty neat. I see those of you in the choir that I know singing, and you've got some wonderful ministers over there. The preachers really do a good job.
Yes,
and I know that's you deacons kind of made that happen. So
yes, well, thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's a really, really neat love story.
Yeah.
And of course, your parents are revered here in Ponchatoula and have been, forever. So that's cool. I'll be right back with the rest of our interview in just a moment. You know how car crash victims struggle to pay for the medical care they need? Well, at the Parker Larison Law Firm, we help busy families recover after car accidents so that they can rest easy, pay their medical expenses without worry, and move forward with their lives. We do this by sharing our free accident handbook, battling Goliath insurance companies, and treating our clients like family. Our clients say we help them save time and recover the money they deserve so that they can focus on getting well and living normal lives again. If you were injured in a car, truck, or motorcycle accident, give us a call now, 985-467-9525. Well, tell me about that. Now, obviously, it was a successful and permanent union. They were together forever.
That's right.
And, you've got siblings, brothers, a sister. Tell me about the next generation of Williams before we get into
So they got married in 1960 at First Baptist Church. A funny story about that. They got married on June the 5th, which was a Sunday. And they had to ask permission to get married at the church on a Sunday because of the services and things. But Mom picked the Sunday because that was her mother's birthday. Okay. Now, soon after that, her mother said, I think I might have been born on the 4th.
You kidding me? That's funny.
So, of course.
How did that come up?
Well, they did, Grandma Annie Mine was her maiden name. She was born in the Larandra area, and the records weren't, I don't know that she had a birth certificate. So it's kind of like, I'm not quite sure.
So not even Ancestry.com monthly subscription can figure that out.
That's right. Yeah, there's no record of that.
That's funny.
But anyway, so I was born in 1961. Right after that, she had my brother, Timmy. Okay. Timmy works with the post office. He's involved with
youth basketball,
and baseball. He practically lives there.
You can't think of local sports without picturing him.
That's right. I think he's the basketball commissioner this year. He's been it a few times, Then she had my sister, Holly, and Mom says that she had like 3 children under 3 years old.
Oh, wow. That had to be tough. Having 2 under 3 right now, and we have our hands full at our house. So I can't imagine being outnumbered by these kids.
So we were stair step, boom, boom, boom. Okay. Holly now lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Right. And at this time, Dad is still working at the coffee pot, which never closes.
Never closes.
So your mother, she's more of a saint than I ever knew.
That's right. We actually lived on Springfield Highway out there near where the Burns live, right next to them, if you're familiar with that area.
Sure.
For those years, we ended up moving to West Willow Street probably when I was 4 or 5, soon after that. Made it a little bit more convenient for Dad and the restaurant and all that. Actually, another story was that Mom was the baker in her family, so she was the one that made the cake. So each one of the girls had a thing that she had 3, 2 sisters and 2 brothers. But she didn't know how to cook really, other things. And so Dad would bring home supper in these jars from the restaurant, So until they closed the restaurant, she didn't have to cook very much, So that's the way that he helped with that. So, Holly lives in Tennessee, and her husband, Mark, is a professor at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. Okay. As you can imagine, once they got to Chattanooga, they've been there 20 years. They fell in love with Chattanooga. It's a beautiful place, So we're not sure if they'll ever make it back down here.
It's gorgeous. The weather's so nice up there.
Yes. And so then about... I don't know, 7, 8 years later, Barry came along.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And so Barry was the first member of your family that I met because growing up, he was good buddies with Monty Adams, who lived next to us on 7th Street.
Right.
And then, of course, he served very honorably under my dad at the sheriff's office. And I think he was a lieutenant or captain or something up there. He did real well.
Yes, he loved it.
I know he was one of Dad's favorite supervisors. And
he was good at it, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt your narrative.
No, that's okay.
Barry's got a special place in my heart.
Right.
He was one of my heroes when I was a kid. He and Monty were Ponchatoula High football players.
Oh, yes. That's right. Yeah. I
Neat
still
guys.
remember him running around that corner. He was short. And, kind of when I was looking at some pictures, my grandfather, Williams, going back to Paul Williams, the one that, Dad's dad, was also short and fast. And one of the things he was known for was being a referee. He was a football referee.
Oh,
too.
yeah. We've got a lot of those in my family, too. Wow.
And so the people would talk about how he could keep up with the receivers as he's running down the field, but his little legs, were carrying him down, and to the point that his family, he sponsored an award that was given out at the football banquet called the Hustle Award.
Oh, neat.
For many years. And so Paul Williams, and he was involved with the Rotary Club too for many years, had perfect attendance, was the secretary. Even when he got sick, I remember that, they would make sure that he made his Rotary meeting each week. So that's Barry, and he gets his speed from Grandpa Williams,
That's neat.
And then soon after that, we had Kenny. And Kenny's the baby, and so he still lives in Ponchatoula. All of my brothers and sisters have children, all grown. The youngest is in 8th grade now at the junior high. So that's Kyle. He's over there. So I'm proud of them and all the kids they help provide the family, so that way I didn't have to worry about doing that.
Well, it's such a testament to your parents that they could have that many kids, and all of you are so well liked and successful. And really, the thing that stands out to me is supportive of our community. We're going to get into the many, many ways you volunteer and support our community, but we mentioned your brother Tim and his sports. I mean, it's just really people that are serving the community, protecting the community, just doing things for us, and that's exciting. And that only happens when mom and dad are setting the right example, taking you to church on Sunday, teaching you the good book, and sending you out into the world with great morals and values and faith. So that's really neat. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So as I was thinking, too, about my life, and, one of the things when you're asked to talk or be interviewed, you just begin to reflect,
Sure.
And you think about the influences on your life, Also, I've been thinking, too, a lot lately is why I'm still doing Key Club.
Yeah. Well, please, before we get, I got to hear this, the why. But before we do that, what the what? Of course, I was one of your Key Club presidents in the 90s, so I know my K-facts a little bit, if you will. But why don't you tell folks what Key Club is and how it serves our community, and then we'll get into your unprecedented role in it.
Yeah. So Key Club is a high school service organization. We like to say, and I believe it's true, the largest high school service organization in the world.
Yes.
And it's sponsored by the Kiwanis Club. So Key Club has to be sponsored by a local Kiwanis Club. And of course, ours is sponsored by the Ponchatoula, the Kiwanis Club of Ponchatoula. It was actually started in 1949, which I think was a year after the Kiwanis Club started here.
Okay.
So the Kiwanis Club began in 1948. Soon after that, they wanted to have a Key Club. And the Key Club started in California as a way to have, and where the key comes from, because sometimes it's like, where did that come from? Is that it was the idea to have the key leaders of the school come together and do service, and community service. So it's about serving the school, the community, and the home. And so that's part of the pledge, too. So it's been around for a long time. The Ponchatoula Key Club's been around for a while, too.
And you've led it most of that time, a lot of that time at least. How many years have you been at it?
So this is 31.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, you start thinking, what's wrong with me? Or
the rest of us are thinking, thank God for Danny.
So, or what is it? What is it about Key Club? And it kind of got me thinking about that, and also the career that I chose, being a teacher and educator. Why? Even now, recently retired, I think about, I missed the classroom. And what was it about the classroom that I miss? Because you could think of a lot of things about the classroom that you wouldn't miss, or work that you wouldn't miss. And part of it is the opportunity you have to change people's lives. There's some careers where you have the opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life and actually change their trajectory in life.
For sure.
And that's like powerful and inspiring and encouraging and rewarding and fulfilling, And so it's hard to not do that. I mean, who doesn't want to change somebody's life,
There's nothing more important you could do.
That's right. Yeah. And so, it goes along with the way I've raised and my beliefs, is to helping others become better people and be successful. And so teaching and working with the Key Club also has that ability to do that. And so with Key Club, we've seen it, give students an opportunity to become leaders,
Yeah.
And so each year what happens is, as I think this is going to be it, this is it. You have this new group of officers that are excited and want to change the world, and, they're kind of looking at you like, what do we do, and I just haven't been able to say, I'll see you later,
Sure.
So we'll see how long that lasts, but because I'm slowing down a little bit,
I believe that when I see it. I don't believe that one bit. And let me say, you're sitting here with living proof of that, because Key Club was my first opportunity to step into leadership in a role that really mattered. I was your president in 1994 and 95. And for that school year, it was big time important work we were doing in the community. We were fortunate enough to win a bunch of awards for it. But the important part of it was we were helping people. And like you said, you were changing our lives and giving us the skills to become leaders and learn the importance of community service and aspire to greater things. And in my case, you even helped me go to college. I got a scholarship through the Key Club. But we were serving our community. We were picking up trash on the weekends. We were going into nursing homes and helping old people get through the holidays and their life. And I mean, the numbers of things we did are, countless. And I was just reading recently, you had written up a little write-up on me that I found when I was moving into this office a few years ago and going through my old junk. And the thing that jumped out at me was my junior and senior years through your Key Club, I did 500 plus hours of community service each year. And we had a club of 100 people. And I don't know everybody's number. I remember we counted it and all. But you may know, and if you do, please share. But you've probably literally led students to giving, hundreds of thousands of hours of service to our community that they otherwise would not have done. That's molded them. It's helped our community. It's been the ultimate win-win situation. And the neat thing about what you've done is most of the time, and I knew this from other clubs, we traveled a lot when we were there, and I know you still do. The Key Club would be just an organization that was kind of passed around from one teacher to the next. This year, Mr. So-and-so would do it. Next year, Miss So-and-so would take over. You gave us a continuity. And then to think that you would do that even after you left your job as a teacher at Ponchatoula High and went on to become a principal and then a central office administrator and now into retirement. I've never heard of anything like that in my life, Danny. So I want to tell you.
I had to examine what's going on. What is it?
But I just want to tell you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know I speak for, of course, I only know the guys that were before and after me. My little brother, who was Louis, who was one of your presidents, and all the other guys that are still my buddies, the William Sims of the world. Thank you. You couldn't have made a bigger contribution to our community. You certainly deserve to retire and enjoy your rest anytime you want, but please do it as long as you can, because it's great work.
And, I've gotten as much out of it as y'all have. And so that's why, it's kind of one of those things that builds each other up, know. And so it's nice to be a part of something that does that, because
for sure.
Not everything in the world is like that,
Yeah, right.
And so you want to be a part of something that encourages and helps people, and that helps you yourself too. Thing I've liked about Key Club is that I'm an organizer, planner behind this. More, at least I see myself that way. I lack a little confidence sometimes.
That's hard to believe.
Well, I'm a behind the scenes person. I like being behind the scenes. So I like being the person that's helping others get the spotlight, so to speak. And so appreciate those comments.
But you're the ultimate planner and just enabler of people becoming better. You remind me a lot of my wife in that every good idea in the house probably comes from her, but she's smart enough to place it in front of me in a way that I can maybe think it's my idea, go implement it. She knows I'm a glory hound and front runner and want to go out there. And you kind of did the same thing. You'll tee something up so that people can take a good idea, run with it. You never cared about who got the credit, never wanted it for yourself. And it's just worked for everybody. Do you keep I know we've kept in contact, and my wife and I are looking forward to our annual trip to the city to go eat, and we come to your house every Christmas. But Have you kept up with other people that have either been officers or sweethearts or members of the Key Club over the years? Do you want to talk about any of them today? Or
well, yeah, I have tried to keep up with all of them. I kind of look at y'all as a part of my family.
Yeah, for sure.
In particular, the presidents became close to each one. And so Facebook has kind of helped with that, So over the years, I've been able to try to reach out to all, trying to be there and follow their lives, try to give a book or two whenever they have a baby. If I think about it, I'm able to do that a little bit more now.
Luke and James love their books, by the way. Yeah,
I'm able to do that a little bit more now that I'm retired. I can kind of sit back and enjoy my grandchildren, so to speak.
Sure.
And of course, then part of the problem is when you have so many, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, of course.
But I've enjoyed those relationships over the years. And,
That's neat. Well, I just remember the profound sense of love in the room. We had a surprise party for you. Was it your 25th anniversary?
25th, that's right. Yeah.
So 6 or so years ago. And people came out of the woodworks, everybody was just so grateful. And there's just such a very real sense of love. It's a two-way feeling. When you refer to us as your kids, so to speak, and our children as your grandchildren, that's a real relationship that goes two ways. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know I speak for my brother Louie and many other friends that either preceded or succeeded me there at the club.
So that's how I get as much out of it as I've given.
Yeah,
so it's been really good. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a bit about your career, if you don't mind, in addition to the Key Club. And I just realized I introduced you wrong. I called you Mr. Danny Williams because, of course, to me, you're always the Mr. Danny of my Key Club days. But you are now Dr. Danny Williams, and you have worn many hats as an educator over the years. Yeah. You've been a high school teacher, an elementary school principal, a central office administrator, taught at the college level too. And I know people are constantly trying to lure you out of retirement to do other jobs. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to become an educator and about your career and just the highlights or just anything you want to talk about?
I do want to kind of go back as I think about changing the trajectory and choosing a job that helps people. I had to think about what are those moments in my life where somebody did the same for me, you know? And so, I go back and I think about, of course, going back into elementary school. Growing up in Ponchatoula, I do want to mention a few memories along the way. I'm just kind of doing it in chronological order, so to speak. But one of my good friends was Mark Anderson. His dad was the Presbyterian minister. His mom was the secretary, Carol Anderson, at the high school for many years. And we would go bottle hunting in Ponchatoula. I don't know if anybody still does that, but we would go around and we would go in the woods and we would try to dig up old bottles. So we would ride around all over town. And so, think about that and think that's really doesn't happen or almost can't happen in our day and age. I don't know how old I was. I wasn't very old. Elementary school, riding our bicycles all over town.
You're the third person to come on this podcast and talk about that. Mary Beth Cravetta talked about doing that in Hammond. My dad did here in Ponchatoula. And you're right. I had the same experience growing up here in the 80s. Would never consider letting my kids do that these days.
Sure. But you'd probably be arrested if your child was riding
but the
across
freedom
town.
you had on them. It's part of why I started our little Bikes for Kids program here. Is because I just remember that sense of freedom that a bicycle and a buddy would give you to go run the roads of Ponchatoula. And it was a safe place. It was a supportive place. If you got thirsty, there were a dozen houses you could stop at to get a drink of water. It was just great. And Mark Anderson, who you mentioned, if you don't mind, I want to interject. I sat with his father at Rotary a week or two ago. And of course, Mark was a buddy of mine and one of our former Ponchatoula Rotary presidents. He's moved to Mississippi, as you know. But his dad told me that he will soon be the governor of Rotary.
Oh, awesome.
So I just want those Mark Anderson friends and fans out there that may be listening to know he's still really doing well and making us proud.
Yes.
So please, getting back to your story, the bottle hunting days.
Right. And so, I've been in love with Ponchatoula from the beginning. I don't, sometimes you also say, well, why? And I guess it's just a small town feel. Family. Today, I can rationalize it by saying, we're close to some great cities, close to an airport. A lot of the good things are close by. Right. But you also have that small town opportunity here. And so I want to say 5th or 6th grade, we did, another good friend of mine was Brian Vineyard.
Okay.
Now, his family had Vineyards Pharmacy that was over there on the corner where the corner cafe is now. So we ended up all being in the band together, too. Mark was in the band and Brian was in the band. In case I forget to mention, another good friend of ours, James Square, was in the band.
I knew he would be coming into the mix somewhere. Right. Sure.
But Brian and I did a social studies project called Our Town, Ponchatoula. I mean, we just loved our town, you know. And so what we did, we made a model of the country market. And we also got, and this is the treasure out of it, we got Miss Wilma Lamp to paint a picture for us. She had a booth in the country market.
Okay.
And we asked her if she painted a picture of the country market.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little, I still have the picture. She didn't sign it because it wasn't anything that she was, signing or selling or anything. Right. She just did it for our little project. But as you can imagine, it's a treasure for me.
It's great artwork.
Yeah. She was known for painting magnolias. Our family bought one of her big magnolia pictures, that's also a family treasure for us. But so we did that project and it just reminded me of how much I thought of Ponchatoula and still do. And so we're going along.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just so you know, we use a photo of the country market in our Ponchatoula podcast logo. So it's I know it's small if you look at it in a phone in the podcast app, but there in the corner is the country market.
Yeah,
so
and of course it's
an iconic building here in Ponchatoula.
Yeah, I don't know when it started, but sometime soon after they also interviewed Miss Richardson over at Richardson's Hardware.
Miss Patricia. My dad was talking about Miss Patricia when he was on the podcast. Yeah,
I remember sitting back in their courtyard and interviewing her about Ponchatoula, and the early parts of the town. And so moving through middle school, I joined the band. My parents were one of those that want us to try everything, know. And so, I played Little League Baseball, wasn't very good. Played basketball at the church, and I played football. Now, I wasn't too bad at little conference football, being kind of a husky and being on the offensive line, Well, I also tried band, and Peggy Barsnick was our band director over at Vineyard. And so I started in band.
What instrument did you play?
I played the saxophone, the tenor saxophone. Okay. And so that was a defining moment, even though it wasn't necessarily one person that influenced, except my parents. Of course, they changed all of our trajectories, don't they?
Yeah, of course.
And so, but in high school, I got to high school and was playing the saxophone my 9th grade year. And my band director said, and this is where you wonder how these things happen. Of course, I believe in God and I believe that He works in our lives. And most of the time, you don't notice it then. In fact, I've tried to kind of see it ahead of time, God working, but I can't predict. But I can always look back and see how God had a hand in things that happened. Some unexplained things that change your life forever. You look back, your life would be totally different.
I love that Garth Brooks song about unanswered prayers, It makes me think of my wife and all the heartache I went through earlier in my life and thank God this girl didn't say yes or this didn't work out because I met her later in life in my 30s and it brought me a beautiful family and she's the best. And
now you're
right, it's God's hand all the way.
And you don't always understand what's happening, why the good things happen or the bad things happen, but you can always look back and see God working. And so anyway, my band director asked me if I'd be interested in playing the bassoon. Now, the bassoon is an orchestra type instrument. And his name was Greg Perniciero. So he was our band director at Ponchatoula High School. And he said it would pay your way through college. Now, why he asked me, I don't know, and why I said, okay, and then why my parents would spend $1,000 on a bassoon.
No lie, $1,000 back then. That's
this
still
was in the
a
middle
ton of money.
70s.
But wow, it went,
But of course, me as a child, I didn't think anything.
And by then
of
they
it.
have 5 children.
Yes,
that's a big.
So I didn't really,
commitment.
I mean, you feel bad, and where you don't appreciate what your parents have done until later. But as a child, I'm thinking, well, why not? Why wouldn't they? I want it, and of course, a lot of times, my parents were just like everybody's parents, trying to give their kids, And so anyway, they invested in that bassoon, and so I started playing that. I played that in the concert. It's not a marching instrument, and I played drums, and in the marching band, and of course, A lot of my great friends still come from the band. Our another good friend of mine, Terry Gowdy, she was the drum major. She ended up being our homecoming queen that year. My senior year. And so a lot of great memories there. But the bassoon actually did pay my way through college.
Oh, so his prediction was correct.
So the idea is, if anybody's looking for a tip to pay their way through college, is you pick an instrument that not many people play.
Right. Stay away from the clarinet and the drums and the saxophone and the trumpet.
Right, because there's 1,000 of those people that are trying to get a scholarship at Southeastern to play in the band. But there's just 2 or 3 or maybe just one bassoon player.
Yeah, that's smart.
And they need a bassoon player. Yeah. And so... and I think, too, part of what happens when opportunities are handed to you or are given to you, it is incumbent on the person to take advantage of that.
Sure.
I don't know if I consciously thought about it, but I practiced a lot. I worked hard.
Yeah.
I wanted to make that investment pay off, And so that helped a little bit, as far, I had to put something in it. It didn't automatically just walk in with the bassoon,
Yeah. Well, what was the college band experience like?
Oh, it was great.
I feel like everybody knows their buddies in high school that were in band, and we feel like we can relate to what they, but is it similar in college or is it different?
Similar. I actually played in the orchestra there in the symphonic band. They called in, of course, a lot of the opera and the musical orchestras. They needed a bassoon. I'd play in that. All 4 years of college. And even after, a few years after, they would call me back to play in some of those productions. And so, you become close to those people in college and maintain contact. Facebook has helped with that too, And actually we had a marching band for a little bit of the time there at Southeastern. I think that was getting when they were in between or started closing down the football or whatever. And I played drums during the marching season there. But actually, I just did that one season so they were paying me a full music scholarship, even though I wasn't a music major. I was majoring in elementary education. But the drums, I was playing the bass drum, and it was just boom, 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 and it was, I don't know, I just said, I don't care if I get the scholarship or not. I don't want to play the bass drum next year.
Anything but more bass drum.
But amazingly enough, they needed me more than I needed them, I guess you could say. And so they continued the scholarship for me to play the bassoon. And so yeah. And now the thing about, so what's happening though is somewhere along the way I transitioned to singing, and in high school, I wasn't in the choir, I was in the band. But at church, I was singing in the church choir. Right. Miss Clegg was our choir director at one point. And then while I was still in high school, I think I began singing in the church choir, that sang on Sunday mornings. Just loved music, a love of music. Of course, that also, some of that comes back from both sides of the family. My dad played the clarinet in high school band. There's pictures of him in the early band, when it was getting started here in Ponchatoula. He also had a little group where he played, I think it was saxophone. I forgot what they called it. They would play at parties, when he was in high school. And then my mom, her uncle, she had an uncle that was a rockabilly star.
Oh, really?
Worley Fairburn. He was famous enough that you can still buy his CDs online. Cool. And he moved to California, which where all famous people would move
of
to.
Course,
But anyway, that music, that love of music's been a big part of my life. Obviously, now I haven't played the bassoon, and this is one of the sad parts about, I say sad, you can't keep doing everything. I guess that's part of it, too.
It's like chapters in your life.
It's chapters in my life. So it's sitting there in my room, It's been about 15 years since I've done anything on it, or maybe 20.
Is it still in good condition?
Probably not. It'll need a little work. So I'm trying to think about what's the next step. It's a hard step to go ahead and, because I have friends from high school that say, you need to get it out. You need to play. Even friends from college, that'll say, because they have the community band up there at Southeastern, But what's happened is that vocal music is now playing a big part of my life.
Right.
So I have that ability to express myself with music, which is one of those things I hope that we keep going. Because when I was working at the central office, I really did everything I could to promote the music programs in our schools, because played such a big part in my life.
Sure.
And it can also do the same, can change
Yeah.
people's trajectories in life.
The arts have become so endangered in American
They have,
education.
yes,
It's really
yes.
scary. They're so
scary.
essential to what we need.
Right.
And you know, I hope Ponchatoula High
Yeah.
and all the other schools in the parish and elsewhere are able to kind of see past today's
so,
budget
too.
crisis
Yeah.
and know that kids need that.
Right.
Because like you're living proof.
Sure.
It can have a lifetime of impact.
Yeah,
And
it has.
eventually you become
Right.
was it the choir director?
Sure.
Tell us about how you went from just singing in the choir to
Right.
leadership
So,
at First Baptist.
So yeah, being at First Baptist and being involved at church and growing up in the church, singing in the choir, there were opportunities throughout our church history where they would need somebody to fill in, And so I filled in once or twice as a youth director and also as the music director, And so there was a stretch there where it was like, 8 years in a row that I was filling in.
Mm-hmm.
I was the interim music person for 8 years, And actually, I had to say, our church was growing and I was still teaching full time.
Right.
And I just didn't feel like I could give it the attention that it needed, when we started going to 2 services. In fact, we were trying 2 services one Easter. And I said, this is about maxing out my ability to give it time.
Because you're teaching, you've got the Key Club, which
Right.
we mentioned earlier, is like another job. If kids are doing 500 hours a year, you're doing double that at least.
Right.
And then you've got continuation of your education. You're getting your master's degree, or ultimately your doctorate. Mm-hmm. Talk about a full plate.
Yeah. So anyway, I filled in, and now I love singing in the choir, supporting our current minister of music, Chip Vickers. And he's been there a little over 10 years, which I think longevity is one of those things that helps churches, stabilizes things, helps programs to grow. And so I fill in whenever they need somebody to fill in. It's nice to be able to fill in,
Right, yeah. But not bear that full-time responsibility.
That's right. So, playing the bassoon, that's one of the things that ended up changing my life. Music in general has changed my life. And so Mr. Gregg was one of those people that, for whatever reason, picked me out of all the people and said, why don't you take this opportunity? Whenever I was looking for a job, my first job, Jim Perrin, you mentioned him earlier. He was the principal at Vineyard. And so he gave me a job there. So that's
what a great man he is.
Oh, yes. It was such a privilege to work with him. And so you think about those, what if this didn't happen? How would your life be different? And you appreciate those that did have confidence in you and give you those opportunities. And so, who knows what would have happened if that hadn't happened. So I taught there for 8 years. And in the meantime, I began working with the Key Club while I was still at Vineyard. And the person that helped that happen was Tuck Morris, somebody else.
Oh, man, Mr. Tuck. We all missed him. We loved Mr. Tuck.
Yes.
Your neighbor, what a dear man he was.
That's right. He was actually my parents' wedding. And so we were a family friend for a long time. I went to Miss Jones' Little Red Schoolhouse before they had mandatory kindergarten. Right behind their house, they had a little kindergarten. And so he was with the Kiwanis, and they were looking for somebody. At the high school, they couldn't get anybody that was interested in doing the Key Club, at that particular time. And so he said, well, what about Danny, And so he asked Mr. Bacher, and he said, well, I guess he works for the school system. I guess he could be it, know.
Right.
And so he asked me, and of course, I'm one of these people that feels honored when asked to do something,
Right.
And so I said, okay, you think I can, and Tuck and I had worked together at church with different groups at church. And so that's kind of how he knew about that I might do okay. Or
he knew you'd be a good fit from that background. He probably watched you grow up in the church.
He did. And so, so that's how, that obviously changed my life, and you think about, well, what if that hadn't happened?
Right,
and you look back and you think about all the wonderful things that happened as a result of that.
Yeah.
So you become very grateful for those people that did do that gave you those opportunities.
When did the opportunity arise to go from Vineyard to Ponchatoula High School?
So as I was, good question. So, I would go over to the high school. I'd have a box over there. I'd check my mailbox. This was I was at Vineyard, of course, by that time, I think Mr. Allen may have become the principal at Ponchatoula High School soon after I started there. So I'd walk by his office. Of course, the Allens are also longtime family friends, you know. Dad was in this group called, I don't know what they were called, the Man Shack Brigade or something, but they would bring the boys that lived in Man Shack home from football practice.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And so the Allens lived in Man Shack.
Yeah, well, Mr. Virgil and my dad were teammates in high school at Ponchatoula High, and they've been buddies forever. And
so Dad would drive,
take them down there,
you know, after football practice. Yeah, I guess the bus would bring them to school, but then after practice, they'd need a way to get home. And so, of course, I remember one of the stories that he tells or Dad tells is that, you know, Virgil kept saying, oh, you know, talking about my mom, you know, if I was old enough, I would marry her, or, you know, something like that, you know. So really encourage that relationship, you know. And so, so we go back, and so I'm going through, and Mr. Allen stopped me one day. He said, you know, we have an opening for a computer teacher. I had coincidentally, if you want to call it a coincidence, had gotten my master's degree and gotten certified to be computer literacy certification. This is the late 80s. Just the computers were just starting to come around, you know. I guess another life-changing thing, you know, that what if that hadn't happened? Of course, God's, you know, work there. And so so somebody was going on leave. The computer teacher was going on leave, and Virgil asked if I'd be interested. Now, before I'd started doing Key Club, you know, bigger kids might have scared me a little bit, you know. I mean, I was kind of, so I don't know before, you know. But I'd been working with Key Club 2 or 3 years by that point, you know.
So you knew at that point you could handle high schoolers. So
you know,
no more question.
And so started to like that age group and felt some confidence there. Of course, I loved Vineyard, and Vineyard was a great place to
Mr. Perrin was there, and
Right.
that had to be tough to leave.
I remember telling him that, you know, and this was just a year, it's going to be a year, you know. I was asking him if it was okay, and I wanted him to guarantee that I'd still have my job there
right.
if this didn't work out or after this year, you know. Well, I went to Vineyard, and as I like to tell teachers that I've, you know, worked with them through the years, and the challenges of an elementary school teacher, and it's still kind of like this, where you don't get the break every day.
Right.
You know, we would have French. Glenn Sanchez would teach French, and we would have band. I think Miss Barsitt might have still been teaching band back then. But the library, you know, let's say we're not having French today. The French teacher is not because that was your French day. That was your break for the week.
Right.
You go, what? We're not having French. What am I going to do? You know, I'm not going to make it. Well, so I went to the high school, and every day.
Yeah.
There was a period where no one came to your room.
There's no way you were turning back from that.
It was like I had died and gone to heaven.
Right.
You know,
right.
It did help clarify, especially as I became an elementary principal and a central office staff member, the struggles of the elementary school and how they needed to have some more planning time, you know, if there's any way to, and I think we've done better with that over the years because that is something that, but it was like, this is fantastic, you know.
I bet.
And so, of course, my time I was able to spend with the Key Club increased, and those, you know, were some of the years where I think I did my best work with Key Club.
Well, and
in the 90s,
I fell in those years, and I remember how neat it was for us to know that you had the room, and not only did you have a classroom, but you had the classroom everybody wanted to be in because you had all these computers, and it was special. The computer tech scene was really hot there, even then in the 90s. But it was really important to us because we knew when your off period was, and I guess your breaks started becoming less of a breaks as the Key Club officers would pester you with questions, but it was important, you know, and we liked having you on site. I'm sure it works well since you've gone, but I can let folks know.
Well, it's been, you know, a little more of a challenge too, you know, and but, you know, tried to still kind of maintain some of that contact. But so while I was at the high school, I also began teaching computer classes to adults through the district. And so that kind of got me, you know, looking back now, got me prepared for other future opportunities that I had. So I would teach for Southeastern and also through the district, teaching teachers how to use the computers. So while I was doing that and finishing up near the, you know, in the 90s, I was at Ponchatoula High School. One Sunday after church, Virgil and June Allen came up to me and said, had you ever thought about being an administrator or principal? And I honestly had never thought about
Yeah.
that. I mean, I just didn't think that I could or would or would want to. And so I got to thinking about it. And I said, well, I have been working with those teachers. And actually, in hindsight, looking back, one of the classes that I taught had a bunch of teachers from Tucker, And so they encouraged me to go back and get my certification in administration. One of those life-changing moments, why they came up to me and asked me that, I have no clue, So I guess part of my point in sharing some of these is that as we live our lives, if we have the opportunity to change somebody's life, that we should be more proactive in thinking about. Because sometimes we sit back and wait for others to identify themselves. But if we see potential in other people, we need to go out there and say, hey, what about you?
Yeah.
And then provide that support and encouragement to help them do that.
Because it sounds like even though you had the talent to do all these great things and lead organizations and lead schools and lead school districts, you didn't see that in yourself at the time. And you needed that nudge, that encouragement from others in a more senior position.
Right.
And it's another example, God placing the right people in your life. You mentioned earlier, you still have to do the work.
That's right.
You had to go back to school. You had to make the grades. And Lord knows, as demanding and smart as Mr. Allen is, he'd never come to you in the first place, if you didn't have the skills and the work ethic.
And part of that, because people did that, you wanted to work hard. You wanted to prove them right. That they made a good choice.
Right.
Same thing happened with my being director of the curriculum instruction the last 10 years of my career with Mr. Coway, and she was our chief academic officer at that time, Melissa Stilley.
Our current superintendent. Right.
She picked me to be on her team.
Oh, what an honor.
It was, Now I'll go into the interview and I think 20 people had applied for the job just thinking this is just practice. There's no way I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
And actually just backing up a week or so before that, I had gone to the school board meeting to have my sabbatical approved so I could finish my doctorate. So I was going to take a sabbatical from Tucker, finish my doctorate. And that was back when you could get sabbaticals for education. I'm at the school board meeting, seeing if they're going to approve my sabbatical. And Mr. Coway had just been named superintendent the meeting before. He named Melissa Stilley chief academic officer. And he announced that they would be advertising for a director of curriculum instruction.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there thinking, well, if there was any job in the central office that I might think that maybe I was halfway prepared for, and would be interested in, that would be it. Because I had been a middle school teacher, high school teacher, and an elementary principal. And this was responsible for K-12 curriculum instruction.
Right.
So, I wasn't sure that I had it, and I just went in with no expectations I would get it, just do my best on the interview, maybe something in the future, and they picked me.
And thank God they did, because you did a great job for this parish for a decade.
And I really tried to remember my experiences in the classroom. Even now, they're trying to call me to go back and sub. And, and I just got finished subbing for a teacher at Ponchatoula High School for 7 weeks. And it just reminded me the impact that a teacher can have on students' lives and how exciting that is and rewarding that is for the person that has that opportunity to do that. So,
well, I've got to ask, and you don't have to answer, but what's next? You're a very young man to be retired, and you certainly deserve to be retired and do nothing but travel and enjoy your exchange students and all the many wonderful things in your life. But I also think, hey, there's still some work left in Mr. Danny.
Dr. Danny. That's been my challenge. And even though I was eligible to retire, even a year before I retired, it was like, well, what's the next phase? And so one thing I've been able to do is I've started teaching online classes for Grand Canyon University. My doctorate helped me to do that. I got my doctorate in 2010. And from Southeastern in educational leadership. And so now I'm teaching students across the country that want to be administrators. And so I'm able to use the experiences that I've had and what I've learned and help them. And so that's kind of it's not as personal as the face-to-face class, but you still feel like you're a part of a bigger picture and God's plan in people's lives, And you mentioned the exchange students. I've been doing that for 15 years. It's another one of those things.
How many students have you had?
I've had 22 students from, I want to say, 13 different countries.
That's amazing.
I have done some traveling. I have a trip planned now to Brazil to see 2 students I had from Brazil my very first year.
Yeah.
The first year was the Hurricane Katrina year. So you can imagine the experience those students had. But it's been one of those things that my family and I have loved doing. They become a part of our family as well.
I know your mother loves it.
More kids and more grandkids.
She adds grandkids to the mix. And
she definitely loves it. I say I do it for her, But we both have enjoyed it. And just look forward to maybe doing some more of that and traveling to see some. And who knows, maybe being in a classroom in the near future,
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
One thing's for sure, you're not going to sit back and drink iced tea all day and watch TV.
No.
You've been a man of action your entire life, and it sounds like it's going to stay that way. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. And before we close up this interview, which has been tremendous, do you have any parting shots that you want to share with anyone, or advice for people that are thinking about following any of these many paths you've taken, or just anything you want to share with our listeners before we go?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, first, if you have the opportunity to give somebody a hand up or to encourage someone or to see the potential in someone, make sure that you do that. And if somebody does that to you, really think about that this might be a part of the bigger plan, And if you have that, get that opportunity to take advantage of the opportunity by doing a good job with it and working hard, So those are some of the main things that I take from my life, And also be sure that when you have an opportunity like you've given me today, which thank you for doing that, to let those people know, or to thank them or recognize them in some way. Because I think that's important too, that we thank those people that have impacted our lives.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you're a class act from start to finish, and I'm very grateful you took the time to share this with us. And thank you. It's been a great interview.
Thank you.
Once again, we have not Mr. Danny anymore, Dr. Danny Williams of Ponchatoula. Thank you. Today's Taste of Tangi is a perfect fit for this episode because we started off talking in the interview with Danny Williams about the local hangout back in the old days. His family restaurant, the Coffee Pot. It was an institution for decades and decades. It was where people would start their day with a hot cup of coffee or a hearty meal. And of course, some vibrant local boy or local gal conversation. Every little town needs a place like that. And if your little town happens to be magical like Ponchatoula, you're lucky enough for the local hangout restaurant to be a really special place. And for today's Taste of Tangi, I'm talking about that type of special place that always makes you feel at home, always helps you leave with a full belly, and just feeling a little better than you did when you got there. So I'm happy to recommend Paul's Cafe. I probably don't have to tell you where Paul's Cafe is located. It's right there in the middle of town, an iconic location, probably the best known restaurant in town. And it's a great place to start out for breakfast, whether you want a giant pancake, piping hot, whether you want a delicious omelet, a sandwich. They just serve so many great things. And, the show goes on past breakfast well into lunch. They have great daily specials. Man, I can't think of a better place to go get a piping hot plate of red beans and rice, white beans, just all your home cooking, the kind of food that sticks to the ribs. Maybe not your ideal diet fare, although you can get grilled chicken breasts and all this stuff that'll keep you lean and mean. But Paul's Cafe is a special place. And it's really, because it all started with Paul, the namesake for the restaurant. He and his family, from Becky to all the rest of the gang, and their wonderful staff, they're just great people. The PVs have been here in Ponchatoula forever. They're doing great things in every corner of town. They have supported our local schools and churches and, nonprofits, just great folks. My dad used to work with Paul's dad, Mr. Reggie Peavy. They taught together out at Maurepas many, many years ago, decades ago, long before Dad was sheriff. And he's always, told me just how much he admires that family and how great they are. And you see that in this several generations now removed from Mr. Reggie at Paul's Cafe. So if you want to get some great food and leave with a full belly, go check out Paul's Cafe. If you want to find out what's going on in town, whether it's the latest gossip or the best news, go check out Paul's Cafe. Talk to the person at the table next to you. If you want to support a family that deserves it, that's done a ton for this town, go check out Paul's Cafe. You will not be disappointed, and that's why Paul's Cafe is the taste of Tangi for this episode. For today's Parker's Pick, we recommend a great business that's owned and operated by a truly great man. That business is Xpress Printing, and the man is Tommy Cooper. Xpress Printing is a full-service retail print shop located here in Ponchatoula on Sisters Road. They can take care of just about anything you need printed. That would be fancy things like wedding invitation, basic things like stationery, anything in between. I know they can fill big orders because they've, had the very biggest clients in our area for years and years. Places like Southeastern and big businesses, hospitals, places of that sort. But they also will handle small jobs, such as in my family, when we have a birthday party, we get the design put together. We go to Mr. Tommy. He prints great invitations. He can help you get things designed if you don't have that ability on your own. He's just a great guy to work with. He's always reasonably priced. He always gets the job done on time. He's 100% professional and easy to work with. It's just a great company. I couldn't recommend it anymore. But more important than that is, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Tommy Cooper is a great man. And I say that because he's a person that gives of himself so much more than you could ever expect. He's just an ultimate giver who donates his time, money, anything he's got to the community to help make it a better place. Whether that's the Strawberry Festival, where he served on the board for many, many years. He's just always the first person to step up, do whatever needs doing, whether it's grunt work, whether it's time consuming, whether it's completely lacking in any glory and credit. He's the guy who makes things happen and does the behind the scenes work so that big glorious things like a Strawberry Festival can succeed. And he's, shown that in our Rotary Club, where I've seen him win, I think on the city level and in the Rotary level, Volunteer of the Year. He's won that probably several times, but he could win it every year because he just never stops. For decades and decades, he's been given to this community, never asking anything in return, and doing it just because it comes from the right place in his heart. He just wants to make this a better place. He loves Ponchatoula. He grew up here. His family's been here forever. And he has become himself personally a local institution. So I can't say enough good things about Tommy Cooper or Xpress Printing. It's just a great man running a great shop. And I know that you will be satisfied if you use them for your printing needs. So that's Parker's Pick, Xpress Printing and Tommy Cooper, Ponchatoula, Louisiana. Because this show is new, any and all support is greatly appreciated. If you haven't already done so, number one, subscribe at the Apple Podcasts app or iTunes or Stitcher or Android, wherever you listen to podcasts. Number two, and this is important, write a 5-star rating and review the podcast. Number three, and this is the biggest, most important thing you could do, share it with your friends. We've got a Facebook page under the name The Ponchatoula Podcast. Check it out, like it, share it. You're going to see information about who we're interviewing, what's coming up. If you really want to get local news about Ponchatoula, Hammond, if you want to hear about local people here in Tangipahoa Parish, please support our podcast. We will be happy to share that information, but we need your help to make this thing a success. So thank you so much. I'm very excited to get going. I've lived here my whole life. I love this area, the people that live here, the things to do here, the food we cook here, etc. I could go on, but we'll do that later in subsequent episodes. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to share the Ponchatoula Podcast with you.